want to flourish as a human being, and I want to figure out how to do that, how I view the world and how I treat myself, finding interesting ways of discovering how to care for myself better. Then I
Hmm.
want to care for the people around me.
Jerry Ziak is a competitive middle and long distance runner and running coach.
Because of that compulsion to be somewhere we're not there. So we end up pushing too hard. We end up doing things that are detrimental to our long-term health because we just want to be somewhere else than we currently are at. Think about injuries as being like the growth opportunity and a learning opportunity. Like, okay, why did this happen? Because I didn't have the knowledge back then that I now have and that I'm still learning.
What a powerful paradigm shift in the mind. Regardless of ability of the body, it's a mindset. Mindset is we have as things happen, whether injury or accidents, things we don't want. And then what?
Why I run and the reasons I move and what I want to do long term, which is caring for myself. Until I can't do it anymore, I want to do everything I can.
Think long term. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to share today's conversation with someone who's made a difference in my physical fitness and mindset. My guest today is Jerry Zayak. He's a lifelong runner of every distance and a running coach. He began competing at age 10 and continues to do so on national and international level. He also wrote the training chapter used in a fantastic book called Science of Running. Analyze Your Technique, Prevent Injury, Revolutionize Your Training by Chris Napier, which helped me in dealing with my Achilles heel injury, and we'll speak about that as well. Jerry is the founder of Quality Pathways Coaching. What a great name. We'll talk about what does that mean actually too. And he works with runners of all abilities through clinics at Forerunners North Shore in the Vancouver region, North Vancouver, as well as both online and one-on-one personal coaching. So friends, buckle up because this man not only has a turbo engine in his fitness and running, but deep knowledge and so contagious with his passion for running and wellness, for training techniques, for daily behaviors we can all apply so we can move well as we age, regardless if you think you're a runner or not. Jerry, a warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Thank you so much, Kasim. Very nice to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. There is so much I want to ask you about. And I have to tell you again, you've truly made a difference for me and you've made me totally fall in love with running. Something I didn't start really till I was 48, even though I was in sports all my life.
My
But
age now.
yeah, yeah, I just started it and you got me hooked. So I'm happy you're joining us today. So I wonder if we can start with Jerry. Like, why do you run? Why is running something that can be helpful for us?
It's a huge question. As you mentioned in your intro, I've been running since I was 10 years old, so that's 38 years now.
Mm,
And after that kind of time, I mean, that's basically a part of my DNA at this point. But in terms of how it's evolved over time, it's the reasons why you do anything completely change if you've been doing it for this long.
mm,
When I was 10 years old, I think it really was the basic level of I was doing something well, and I was winning the initial cross country and track races that I was entering, and I was being
mm.
pat on the head and on the back and saying, great job, you're good at this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm getting positive feedback, I'm getting positive reinforcement.
you got rewarded.
What's that? I'm getting
You,
rewarded. Exactly, you're getting
yeah,
rewarded for what you're doing, and that feels good. But I think pretty quickly, you're not going to, especially at that age, it can be pretty fickle between moving between one
mm,
thing and another. So, having success at one thing doesn't mean that you're not having success at other things as well. That might be even more interesting. So, what made this behavior stick is really the question, right? And I
mm.
think that it just evolves from this idea of extrinsic motivation, doing something because you're getting praise and because
Right.
other people are saying this is a good thing, to eventually having these intrinsic motivations that are like, this feels good. I feel better
Yeah.
after I run than I did before. I enjoy the feeling of movement and of moving my body through space, the freedom of it, being able to, the simplicity of running is an amazing thing. So many
Mm,
activities that people get involved in require so much equipment. right? You have to go to a gym, a
Yes.
pool, you have a bike that is now worth thousands of dollars. Um, you know, even the team element. I mean, teams are great. I think there's very huge positives to team sports, obviously. But for me, the draw of the individual sport was simply that I could put on my shoes, head out the door,
Yes.
and anywhere I was in the world, doesn't matter where, I could go out and go for a run. It's just the simplicity of it is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Now, now it gets into another level altogether because um, as you get older, now I'm 48 and I'm still doing it, and there's a
Mm,
lot of people that I've been colleagues with, acquaintances with, great friends with over the years, that
mm,
were involved in running in a competitive way, or recreational. And because of various
mhm.
reasons, life, moving on to other things, injuries, they are no longer doing it. And
Yeah.
so, how do you do it over a lifetime and keep on being able to maintain your body in such a way that you can do this until 48? But I want to do until 58 and 68 and 78. I want to be
Yes.
doing this for many decades to come. And so now it's become a passion of like, okay, running is my barometer. This is the thing that tells me,
Mm,
am I looking after myself properly, that I can still do this in what a lot of people would say is the most basic of human movement, right?
yes.
There's people who are like, well, this is how we evolved. This is how we got our prey, when we hunted things. This is how we foraged. This is how we moved from one place to another. If we couldn't run, we weren't human, right? That's what made us human,
Yeah.
is that basic ability to move in this way. And
This born to run idea.
this born to run idea, exactly. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
work, right? But
Yeah.
and of course, you have to accept that not everybody can run. There's reasons that
Yes.
all kinds of again, injuries or genetics, or even from birth, that I'd be able to do this
That's
activity.
right.
But if I can, is one of the things, until I cannot do it for whatever reason, because
Keep doing it.
happens
Yeah.
more, that'll prevent me from doing this, and I want to accept that and be okay with it. But until I can't do it anymore, I want to do everything I can, creating the daily habits and learning more and more and more about, as I age, how can I keep on doing this? How can I maintain
Mm,
what I call my vehicle, in a way that somebody might maintain a vintage car over years?
yes.
So,
I love there's so many things that you said I want to unpack, but it reminded me of one of the things I learned from you is looking at running as movement, one form of movement. And if we get injured or if we're not able to do this movement, whatever things can we do to strengthen the chain in our body? I remember you saying that to me after my Achilles heel injury. And like you were so positive and inspiring to me because it took me months. I could barely walk. I would still come and see you. You were at the foreigner stores there. I would drop by. I'm like, I'm walking now 10 minutes. Like I was just slowly recovering. And there's something you told me that I'll never forget. He said, we just have to strengthen the different chains in the body.
that's right.
And so it's not like, oh, I'm out. That's it. I'll never run again. I loved that idea of what other movements can we do if we're not able to run on the pavement. Like I started doing water running, doing more biking and recovery. So this idea of moving.
I think that's it. Is moving, and being where you are right now.
Mm,
I think we also often get ahead of ourselves. We always want to be where we're not, right? And because of that compulsion to be somewhere actually we're not there, um, and we want to get there, so we end up pushing too hard. We end up doing things that are detrimental to our long-term health because we just want to be somewhere else than we currently are at. And
right.
so, if your body's giving you signals, if it's communicating to you all the time about what is beneficial for it. It's trying to give you signs. Pain
Mm,
is a sign that something's not right. So is the quality of the movement that you're engaged in. So if something is bothering you, hamstring, Achilles, knees, or whatever it might be, and it's
mm,
forcing compensation. And compensation is, a simple way of thinking about running, of course, is that you're limping, right? You're
right.
taking weight off one side in order to relieve that discomfort or pain that you're feeling. Um, so if your body's telling you that,
Mm,
then you have to listen. You have to pull back and say, okay, what level? Maybe it's running easier. Maybe that's all you have to do, or running on a softer surface for a certain period of time. We can talk about a lot of the mythology behind running on concrete being bad for your knees, that kind of stuff. We can talk about that later.
Yes.
Because a lot of it is myth. There's a lot of myth wrapped up in this, and urban, myth. But yeah, it's saying, like, okay, but for a time, running on the road for sure is more load than running on a soft surface like grass or trail or sand or whatever. So maybe you go onto that surface and you're like, oh, that little bit of Achilles issue or knee issue doesn't
Mm.
bother me on this surface. Or if I go up and do the grouse grind, which is this very popular trail hike in North Vancouver, and you notice that going uphill doesn't bother your knees, but it's a great workout. Okay, well,
Right.
until things start calming down, until you go and see a physio and get things, get your little helpers, I was thinking
Yes.
physios and chiropractors and massage therapists as our mechanics, right? Taking this
Yeah.
vehicle analogy, I take that very far sometimes. But you're taking your vehicle into the mechanic, and you're saying, let's figure this out. Things are out of alignment. This is not working well. If we do that for our cars, and we say maybe it's not the best thing
Yeah.
to be driving this right now, because if I do, I'm going to ruin this vehicle.
Right.
You do the same thing to yourself if you keep on not listening to the fact that things are out of alignment or hurting. That's
Yes.
to be resolved here. So.
I want to ask you about that because I learned that one the hard way is discerning when to push through pain.
Mhm,
What I thought was just bear through. It's okay because I did have signals. And this was a couple years ago when I got injured. I
mhm,
started getting signals around my calf. I'm like, it's really hurting, but it might be just sore. Just keep going. And it was actually at my first half that I attempted that 10K into it. Pop! I couldn't move anymore.
yeah,
But how would you how can the listeners learn about that? How do you discern
mhm.
between I just got to push through a little more, or this is telling me to stop here? And I learned it the hard way, but I wonder, could someone prevent from learning the hard way? How do we?
I think so for sure. I think there's a lot of great guidelines, from physios and from for me, not being a physio, but just experience over the years of
Mm,
I've had a lot of injuries. But the interesting thing about injuries is that with running, a lot of the injuries that people get with running are not lifetime injuries. People are like, oh,
mm,
running's it's bad for your knees and all this kind of, like we were talking about before. But the you get hit from the side in soccer or in football, and your knee is you tear your ACL or your
yeah,
meniscus in a really terrible way, and you're like, that's it, and I'm
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
playing football anymore. You're damaged, right? you know, we are learning more and more about even those types of injuries, that how to repair them and how to strengthen them and scaffold them through
Mm,
injury prevention exercises and daily habits there as well. But um, with running, a lot of it is just simple. You did a little bit too much too quickly, and things
yeah.
are in a weakened state. They're not in a damaged state. The pain is coming from your body saying, like, yeah, this is not right. Things are not feeling good here, but you haven't necessarily
Mm,
ruptured or torn or done any real damage. And so I think knowing the difference and trying to figure out over time, what is an ache and what is an injury. And an
mm,
ache is like, okay, I should be listening. I don't want this ache to turn into an injury or to turn into something that will
right.
stop me from running. But for me, what the differentiation is a couple of things I've already mentioned, which is it pain, like real pain. And a lot of physios will say, you don't want to be running with anything that is above 3 out of 10 on the pain scale. So if you have
Mm,
10 is like just unbearable, searing pain, and 0 is like 100%. Like, where is this optimal level of pain tolerance that you should be going through? And I think the idea with 3 out of 10 is that's the point where you can still relax and you can still
mm,
move, whether it's running or any other activity, without compensating, without limping, without favoring. Because if you're favoring one side more than the other, you're going to be creating neurological pathways that are very inefficient. And I'm
yeah.
very into this idea of neurological pathways. That's where the term quality pathways comes from.
Your
But
coaching program,
get
yeah.
again later. Um, but I think that if you have these little quality controls in your mind about how you want to move, so for me, there's, I can break it down into so many different little, minute levels in terms of how I want to feel when I'm running. Postural position,
Mm.
where my foot is striking relative to my center of mass. I want my foot coming down underneath my center of mass, not too far in front,
Mhm.
and braking on every stride. I want to relax my upper body. I want to be in a relaxed mental state.
Mm.
So all these little, things that I think of as, quality controls, ways that I want to move. And if the pain that I'm feeling is above 3 out of 10 on that pain scale, I probably can't maintain those levels of quality, that level of quality of movement. And so what
Right.
then I'm just going to be
So you
practicing.
compromise the movement itself.
And then
Yes.
I'm reinforcing low quality pathways, low quality
Yeah.
pathways of movement between the mind and the body. You're just teaching yourself bad patterns.
Habits.
And you think you're being, people think they're being tough, right? They're like, I just, no pain, no gain. Oh, I'll push through.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but that's poor learning, right? You're just not doing
Mm.
it well any longer because you are making these compromises for this, this dysfunction that is developed, right?
Yes. And this would apply to all forms of activity. This I
Absolutely.
really like this. So if someone, if they haven't run before, if you're doing walking or swimming or whatever it is, like I really love that little guideline. Like, is it a three? Is it more than a three? Just tune like the idea that you really encourage us to do is tune in. Don't just push through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tune in. And I think for me, what happened with that injury, I got so excited, and because my times were starting to drop, I was running faster. I was like, "Let's keep going." And somehow, even though we've said it so many times, like, don't compromise your form, relax. But I got caught up
Get caught
and
up. Yeah.
I ignored my own body
Yeah.
because of that principle. Is that a misconception that no, like, can you share about the mindset because you speak about the like train enough, like hard enough,
Hmm.
and use the concept of while a lot. So,
Hmm.
so can you speak about like why no pain, no gain is a myth, and what are alternative paradigms? And
Hmm.
I love what you offer.
Well, I mean, in terms of no pain, no gain, as kind of this ethic of hard work, that you want to prove to yourself that you can push yourself hard, that you can put like effort is being rewarded, right? We do see it as a positive thing, and and to a certain level it is, right? Effort, putting effort into something shows that you want to do well at it, you care about it, you care enough to
Mhm.
actually put effort and thought and physical effort into, if it's movement that we're talking about, mental effort, or if we're talking about cognitive learning. Um, but too much effort in anything, it becomes a detriment, right? It becomes a compulsion and almost an addiction, because you think that, okay, well, I tried as hard as I could, so the fact that I failed then wasn't because I didn't try, right? So that becomes like
Yeah.
the foundational principle of whether you're doing things properly or not. It's like, well, at least I tried, and it's like, yeah, and that is good. Don't throw that away completely. But we
Mhm.
also know that if you go into, if we're talking about just learning in terms of mental learning, um, you go into an exam and you're just like, you try too hard because you're just so motivated, you just really want to do well,
Yeah.
and it's almost like you're overstimulated, right? You're going to fail because you try too hard, right?
Yeah.
There's somewhere, and but if
Yeah.
you don't care enough, and there's not enough effort because you're not engaged, you don't care about what you're doing, that's going to be under stimulus, right? It's too little, effort being put in.
Right.
So, so the key term, of course, when we're talking about all of this is optimal, and how to
Mm.
find optimal. What's the sweet spot that we're trying to find? So for
Mm.
me, in
Oh,
terms of
is that the you've mentioned before? Is that the difference between optimal or maximal?
that's right,
What
yeah.
what is that? What's the maximal versus the optimal?
Well, maximal, I mean, maximal often suggests, again, effort, that we're putting in a maximum
Ah,
effort. But if that effort that we're putting in is not this, well, in training, if it's something that we can't make adaptations to, so we're not, either mentally or physically, mentally making, like, you're actually learning how to do
mm,
something better, physically making physical adaptations, whether we're talking about strength of our muscle fibers, or the amount of energy that we're using. If we're going so far into fatigue that our body isn't able to recover properly from day to day,
Mm,
then we're just breaking. At some point, you're going to break down, and there's all kinds of ways of
mm,
breaking down. We can break down in terms of, yeah, actually injuring a muscle or a knee, or like tendon, bone, because we haven't become strong enough to handle the load,
yeah.
or mentally, that or energy wise, we can talk about the energy side of things, that you just haven't built up the capacity to be able to handle it, again, on a daily basis, until you finally just, I mean, at the extreme, people develop, chronic fatigue disorders and that kind of thing,
Mm.
and they're forced to stop. Right? There's
Yeah.
a, we have a
The body shuts. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have a famous doctor in the city here, right, in Vancouver, Dr. Gabor Mate, right, who wrote
Yeah.
the When the Body Says No. Eventually, if you keep on pushing, 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 your body will tell you to stop. It'll
Yeah.
make you stop, right? So pushing to the maximum. Maybe we go there on race day sometimes. That's kind of like that's your testing ground, and
Yeah.
testing ground, you are 100% healthy, you're rested, you're ready for that challenge, so that if you push yourself to the maximum, you don't put yourself into a state of injury or long-term fatigue. You can bounce
Mm.
back from it quickly because you're so well prepared that you can actually then take a few days, maybe a week or a few weeks if it's a really long event, and then pick up where you left off and keep on
Keep
going.
on going. Yeah.
Healthy, right? But a lot of people go to the well, and they go to a place where, and I think there's reasons for why people do it. I've coached ultra marathoners before, and people that do multi-day races, and
Mm.
hundreds of kilometers at a single stretch. And
Wow.
there's it's admirable to to see what they're trying to do. They are trying to go to a place where the body is saying stop. Like,
Yeah.
don't do this. Like, I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. I have nothing left. And you will push beyond that and see where those limits of human endurance and tolerance and that kind of stuff are.
Mm.
But I have a hard time sometimes balancing that with what I see as the primary goal of why I run, and the reasons I move, and what I want to do long term, which is
Mm.
caring for myself, for health. I don't want the goals and I love competition. It's the game, right? It's the game
Mm.
element of what I do. That's the celebration day, where you've all the way, like, you've done all this training and all these daily habits, and hopefully you enjoy those on their own level. That
Yeah.
it becomes internalized, that you actually, this is the way I love to live, right? I love the process. But that
Mm.
that testing ground is like, let's go. I have all this ability now that I've built over time. Let's go and test it out, right? But that's game day, right? That's like,
Yeah.
you should be having fun, and it shouldn't. If you do it in the right circumstance and you do it in a balanced way, you don't do it too often, you don't over race, and over challenge yourself, that it's not necessarily um, opposed to the idea of long-term health, right? It can
Right.
balance with it. So I don't want to put judgment on people who want to go to the limit and test something else inside them. That perseverance of like,
Right.
what happens when I'm really at this place of just like complete, like, almost hopelessness. Like, I think people
Yeah.
want to go there sometimes. They want to see whether they want to test their mettle, right? So I do understand it, but I'm also like, be careful, like,
Yeah.
be careful with it, like, and ask yourself why. Why do you want to go there? If you're your own keeper, you're your caretaker, and if you could put yourself outside of yourself and say, okay, I'm in charge of this mental, physical creature,
Hmm.
and I want it to flourish. I want it to do well, and do, like, yeah, grow, get stronger, move better, be healthier mentally and physically over time, and continue to do this for as long as we possibly can, for as long as we're alive. So
Mm.
that the very, day that you are no longer here, that you're still, if you can, still move well, and then to be like, oh,
Yes.
I'm done.
See,
Like, you know.
I love that. I love that because it's a change in perspective from this, which is part of a mindset that I had to fight myself out of, which is
Mhm.
gotta leave everything on the mat, like let it all rip, everything I got every time. It's like, wait a minute. I had to learn to modulate. Like when do we put, turn the gears on, when not to turn the gears on. Because what you're saying is think long term. This
Yeah,
is not just about that event or that day. This is a lifetime of well-being. What do you
absolutely.
need to do for that? And this is the same, by the way, if someone is just trying to like walk a kilometer. Maybe for some people listening, it's challenging even to walk a kilometer.
Mm.
But principles apply the same, is optimal. Don't just push yourself to the maximum. Just slowly. Yeah.
There is kind of like a thought experiment to say, okay, well, what if I couldn't run tomorrow because I get in a car accident?
Mm.
God forbid that these accidents happen, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of luck built to whether, if I'm going to be able to run when I'm 90, um, maybe 98, maybe there's another 50 years here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of luck built in there, right? Like accidents happen. That's just life, right?
Yeah.
So, one of my, I guess heroes would be somebody like Stephen Hawking, right? He
Mm.
can't move. There's no movement at all, when I mean, he has passed now, but I mean, I know that he lived decades longer than he was supposed to live, and with the disease that he had, and
Mm.
it's gone a blank in terms of exactly what disease that
Mm.
he was fighting, but I know that he was supposed to be dead within a number of years, not decades, and
Yeah.
it's my theory, and people could totally debunk this, but my feeling is that the way he was able to move was cognitively, right? Like he was,
Mm.
thinking is movement, right? You are engaged in saying, okay, well, there's something I want to figure out that I don't know yet, I haven't learned,
Mm.
and I want to get from here to here, right? And how do I get there? How do I move from this understanding where I'm currently at to this understanding, which is still a mystery to me. And
Mm.
he was delving into the mysteries of the universe in his mind. He was traveling constantly, right? That's the way he was able to move. So,
Yeah.
as long as you're a conscious, living person, movement is not just a physical thing. But of course, you can say that mental is physical too, because when he's moving, he was creating neurological pathways. He was
Yeah.
growing on that level of the brain constantly. And I think that's what kept him alive, because growth was still happening. He was still living,
Mm.
he was still learning, he was still adapting. So if the brain and the body is still doing that, you're living until the point where you can't
Mm.
do that anymore. That's what life is. So I want to think that if I got to that point where I was a paraplegic and I couldn't move and I was just in my mind and that was all I had,
Mm.
okay, the same questions apply. How do I want to move? Where do I want to go? What do I care about? What do I want to spend my time thinking about? Um,
Mm.
that's what it's all about, right?
Mm. What a powerful statement. What a powerful way of paradigm shift in the mind, like what you just shared. It's like, regardless of ability of the body, it's a mindset. This is what you're naming. It's a mindset that we can have as we age. Mindset as we have as things happen, whether injury or accidents, things we don't want. And then what?
That's right. That's right.
Then what we can
Well,
apply is that mindset, which
that's
is
right.
just naming. It's like, how can I grow in moving my mind, even if my body's not able to move as much as I wanted or at all? How can I move my mind? Because that's really the part we have control over.
That's right. Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
you're aware of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, right? Well,
Yes.
I mean, the most powerful, you know, the details of every part of the book, I've read it decades ago, but what
Mm.
always stuck with me was that basic idea of human freedom that he came to, where he said,
Yeah.
if you're stripped of everything and you have nothing left, you're just a number, you have no name, your family is gone,
Mm.
you don't know if your family is dead or alive.
Yeah.
And, he would see people being killed for no reason right in front of him. And
Yeah.
his thought, and he was a psychologist before he went into the concentration camps,
Yes.
and but his insight in the concentration camp, he was like, this is the most basic of human freedom, which is until you are knocked out or you're dead, so you're not conscious any longer, your ultimate human freedom is your ability to choose your attitude in whatever given set of circumstances that you find yourself. So that idea of, and so I think he took that, I think it was,
Yeah.
is it what logotherapy was what he developed as a form of
Yeah.
psychotherapy after he
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
out and survived, obviously. Um, and so that was the idea of like meaning therapy. That meaning is what human
Yes.
beings are all about. We create our meaning. And if you are stripped down to like, now you have nothing, but in this moment, you can choose your attitude and you can choose your
Mm.
mindset. You can choose how you want to be as a person within this. These are your confined, circumstances. This is the context that you find
Yeah.
yourself. Okay, accept that, at least to
Yeah.
the level you have to. And then how do you want to be? And it changed his whole way of behaving within that context of the concentration camp. Simple
Yeah.
acts of kindness, of sharing that little bit of bread he had, or just the way he talked to people and the way he
Mm.
treated himself. And it's just like, until I'm not here any longer, this is how I'm going to be. So yeah, that's a hugely powerful thing, is to understand that you are in charge of your own mind and your own attitude, that you are
Mm.
bringing to whatever behavior, or any interaction you're having with people, any mood, like if it's running or whatever it's going to be. It's like, what are you bringing to it? What is your mindset? What is your
Mm.
attitude? How do you want to be as a person? Right? And
Yeah.
it's not all the stuff you have. It's who you are. That is the intrinsic you, right? It's not all the stuff
Mm.
that's around you. It's not the clothes you wear. I mean, this is, maybe it's all obvious stuff now, right? But this is, who are you, right? If you
Yeah.
put all that away.
This is so important because it touches on something super fundamental and really life changing, which is it's not as much as the events that happen in our life that really impact us, but it's how we deal with them, which doesn't make what happens okay. Like, it's not saying what happened with him was okay, and what his experiences and what he witnessed, but it's like, this is what he taught us. Like, even surviving the Holocaust, it's like, wait a minute, he said, choice is the last human freedom. And that, for me, when I first heard it, was like, twisted my brain, like, in a good way. Like, he said, choice is a lot. Like, no one can take your choice. No
That's
one
right.
can take the choice of how you look at something.
And I love the idea that, as a therapy, that starting with that, then you can say, okay, if you really have, because I think a lot of people go into therapy with this idea, that I've lost everything. Like,
Mm,
I mean, of course, that's not the only reason, but there's some people that go in with complete despair, right? That's just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
everything's gone. I've lost everything. I've hit rock bottom. And not that Viktor Frankl would say, "Oh, good," but I mean, if you would,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
that means we're at the starting point. That's the most powerful place to be. You can rebuild from there, right? Let's build a foundation of, like, what do you care about? What are your values in life? And now let's start growing those things. Like, let's start
Mm,
interacting with those things that you still care about, right? And if you don't care, if you say you don't care about anything, well, the fact that you're still alive means, yeah, you probably do. There's still
yeah.
something that you care enough to keep on living. So let's start there. There's
Mm,
there's your foundation. Let's start building it up, right? And
yeah.
and I'd say my idealism, is this belief that you if you're starting at the beginning, really understand your values of why you care about the things you care about. So
Yeah.
if it is all extrinsic stuff, if it's money and materialism and everything else, what is it that you think that's giving you, right? I mean, I feel like,
Mm,
pleasure, right? It's like, well, fair, like, you are getting that, but
yeah.
ultimately, if you think you're going to be happy because you have these things, and that if
Mm,
all of a sudden you lost it, then you're not happy. A good friend of mine used to say, "That's just weak sauce." It's like, I guess Scott's talking about hot sauce, right? It's like, there's not much, there's no depth to that. There's nothing that is like, well, you know, where's the real core of you, if
mm,
you don't, if all it is what you surround yourself with, right?
yeah.
So, for me, what caring is simply, it's like, yeah, if I'm a this mental, physical, conscious animal, okay, of course, I want to care for myself. I want to
Of
I
course.
want to flourish as a human being, and I want to figure out how to do that. And I know that's going to come from my how I view the world and how I treat myself, finding new and interesting ways of discovering how to care for myself better. And then I
Mm,
want to care for the people around me. And if I'm caring, I always think of this, the I guess the analogy of being on a plane, and they, when the if the oxygen mask ever fell down, they say, put it on yourself first.
yes.
If you can't look after the person beside you, if you're passed out yourself, right? So I think you do have to start with yourself as the first level of care. Like, look after yourself,
Yeah.
flourish as a human being, and then you can teach people how to do that. You can teach
Yes.
your family, and I have a son who's grade 6 now, and
Mm,
I want to be an example. I want to show him how to do that. And
mm.
as he gets older, he's going to make his own mistakes. He's not going to do everything his dad does or recommends for
Of
him. He has to
course.
make his own path. But at least I can be an example to that. And I think through coaching, that's why, that's where the coaching comes from. That's why I've
Mm.
enjoyed that for so many years, is I can pass on the things that I'm learning. And I
Yeah.
really want to be the kind of coach who doesn't continue to buy into the things I'm actually coaching, because again, weak sauce. It's just,
Yes.
like, keep on, like, can you really teach? Like, yes, I know that people can teach things that they don't do themselves, but they should be demonstrating the mindset in some,
Yeah.
even the way that they're coaching, they're demonstrating it. How they're doing things shows care. It shows,
Mm.
shows that they're engaged and that they're immersed in what they're doing, that they care about you. So even the yeah, I think even the act of you know coaching, if you're not actually running, if I couldn't run myself, I know I could still coach, but I would
Right.
like to still be an example in terms of demonstrating how I'm continuing to move and behave in the same principles that I'm passing on, through coaching, right?
Right. Where you're in the laboratory of it. Like you are in it. You're
That's right.
continuing to exploring it. I want to go back to something you said earlier, which I really appreciated. This, be where you are. Like, if someone's starting to run or if someone got injured, it's like, okay, let's start there. And I know for me growing up in martial arts, I used to get injured, and then I did football, and then soccer. And there's a lot of injuries, and especially as a teen, I got better in my early 20s and onwards. But when I used to get injured, oh boy, oh boy, like I'd be depressed, I'd be angry, I'd be annoyed. Like it takes me a long time because I knew nothing. That's where I felt good about myself, is being active. And when I couldn't move, I didn't have the mindset yet.
Yeah.
And what this is what you're highlighting is be where you're at, which is very mindful. Something I teach in my center, like mindfulness.
Yeah, be where you're at, and I mean, and when injuries happen, be there is a certain amount of like stubbornness and and resilience to when you get injured, being like, no, I'm going to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything I can to figure it out. I've had some interesting injuries over time. I currently actually have. I'd call it an issue versus an injury, because I can still run and I can still run in a balanced way, but there is discomfort there, and it is with it's within that
Mm,
3 out of 10 barrier. But this is something that's been ongoing for about 20 years for me. It's kind of an Achilles injury like you've had,
mm,
kind of what you call an insertional issue right at the heel bone on the back of my heel,
mm,
and caused by pressure on the back of my heel, a lot of basically like a calcium deposit that had developed on the back of both my
mm,
heels. You see it in not just in running, but in hockey and soccer, really tight shoes with a hard heel counter, which is the support mechanism at the back of the shoe pressing in. But connected with that was that I developed this at a time that I was at the peak of my training, doing a lot of mileage, doing up to 200 kilometers a week of running.
oh
Um,
wow.
right. And with this issue, I was able to train through that, and I ran my fastest marathon time during the period that I had this issue. But I know I made it worse, and not the actual issue. The bone issue that has to do with the mechanics of running and even the shoes, the supports in the back of the shoe that can cause this pressure. But in terms of the pain that I was developing and that I reinforced, I have a very good friend
Mm,
who's actually two friends. Laura
mm,
Boyd at UBC, it's the Brain and Behavior Lab, and a good friend of
mm,
mine who I've known for decades, who I have now kind of introduced Laura and my friend Chris Lamb,
mm,
because they're interested in the same idea of neuroplasticity, and
mm,
how the understanding of neuroplasticity can change our approach to pain management and creating desensitizing pain pathways, and reinforcing
mm.
pathways that are more associated with functional movement and hopefully pleasure over time, rather than this pain and
Right.
dysfunction. And basically, what he's told me, he said, "There's nothing wrong with your heel any longer. The yes, you have a calcium deposit there, but you've had that for 20 years, and the pain sometimes comes, and it sometimes goes.
Mm.
You sometimes reinforce it and sometimes you don't. But he goes, this is all neurological. You've created pain pathways that are creating a high level of sensitivity, and there will be redness, even stuff and that kind of stuff as well, because it just feels very irritated.
Mm.
You can still get some physical symptoms because of the neurological issues that you're and the neurological pathways that you've reinforced for so long. But he's working with me on techniques to basically retrain um,
Oh.
the those pathways so that we can basically deal with it, for good. And
Mm.
so here I am after 20 years of having this issue, and I'm like, okay, now my biggest goal here is like, can I manage this in such a way that I desensitize those pathways that I've created, that I've reinforced. And a lot of it is, you put so much into, like into the pain and the sensations that you have. There's emotion that's involved in there. So
Mm.
even changing how I think about it, so that if I'm doing exercise and I'm feeling something there, instead of feeling like anger and disappointment and frustration, I try to be like, I'm just going to be happy. I'm smiling, like I'm not going to get mad about this, right? I know nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm coaxing my heel into being like, hey, you're okay, buddy. Like it's fine. You're
Yeah.
all right. So yeah, it's really really interesting stuff that we're learning about how we reinforce these pathways, and
Mm.
that we actually can retrain our brains to actually because of this neuroplasticity, this ability to relearn and retrain, that we can actually do something about this long term. I think
Mm.
it's an amazing um, field of research that's happening right now. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So it's rather than this kind of fatalistic approach, like, oh, something happened, that's it, there's nothing I do.
Mhm.
It's more like the theme that I keep getting from you is let's figure it out.
Let's figure it
How
out.
can I work with this? What can I do to work with this, around this, and also relate to it differently?
Hmm.
Right? Like you're saying, like smiling with it, being with it, instead of like just hating it, pushing it away, and getting dejected. Like you're like, oh, let's work with this.
And I think like, if you always think about injuries as being like, okay, I'm mad about this because I can't do the thing I want to do. But if you think about it in
Mm.
terms of as a growth opportunity and a learning opportunity, like, okay, why did this happen? Well, I know that I did certain things to make this happen,
Yeah.
and because I didn't have the knowledge back then that I now have and that I'm still learning. So I'm not going to
Mm.
be upset with myself. I was like, yeah, of course, knowing what I know now, I would have done some things differently back then to have not reinforced these patterns. But now that I've experienced them, it's like, okay, what can I do now that will make this, if I call this a weak link in the chain, how can I make
Mm.
it a strong link in the chain? Can it become something that is like so strong, and I increase the mobility of it, I increase the good the positive perceptions, the positive emotions that I have around this area. Can I learn so much about it that it becomes something that's now it's a strong link in the chain? But of
Yeah.
course, then there might be another link that reveals itself, and you're like, okay, well, not that you're saying good. You're like, yeah, but now that I know that weak chain is there, link in the chain is there, maybe I can do something about it, right? If I haven't
Mm.
truly broken it. And what my friend Chris is saying, he's saying you haven't broken anything. Still it's functional. The fact that I can
Mm.
push off with power, and I can go for a long run, and even though it might be sore afterwards, it calms down. By the next day, I could run the next day if I wanted to,
Mm.
right? And what I've noticed is that as I've experimented with some of the techniques that he's passing along to me, is that my resilience is increasing. So it used to be that
Mm.
if I ran a 10-kilometer run, for instance, at a certain pace, that it would take 3 days before it felt as good as it did before that run, right? It would
Right.
take a while to recover. And now that's happening, quicker, right? So it still might have the same discomfort,
Mm.
but I'm bouncing back quicker. So there's more
Mm.
resilience and strength within the system now, right?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to quickly thank you for stopping by and watching this content. It truly means the world to me that you're interested in creating positive change. I also want to invite you to join our amazing community. I have free events online about mindfulness, mindfulness based stress reduction, laughter, as well as retreats that you can do from the comfort of your own home, and are you ready for this? Self paced program that you can do about mindfulness and stress reduction. So you can join the newsletter below to stay up to date on all these goodies. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and press that button. It really helps me to keep this content going and reach out to more guests. Thank you so much again, and may you continue enjoying watching this episode. This brings up a couple of things I want to ask you about as well. And I know we'll go back to some of the misconceptions in a moment about running, but I wonder about recovery. What helps you in recovery, and what do people get wrong about recovery?
Right. Well, I think the first thing, I mean, if we're talking about training itself,
Mm,
um, you have to think about, again, that idea of optimal. So in terms of recovery, we're actually asking the question about optimal load, and
mm,
that's saying, okay, if I do a certain amount of physical activity today, certain distance of
mm,
a run at a certain intensity, um, and all the other things I'm doing during my day that feed into this as well. How stressful
mhm,
is this time of my life? You know that there was a flood
mm,
in my suite, and I'm actually speaking from a friend's place, a neighbor, because yeah, we have these fans on. It's disruptive. I'm sure even the noise is a stress on my system as it is. So all these other factors, like you got a bad sleep, you are, had to rush at, something happened, flood, and you didn't have a very good meal, and all of these, your diet, your sleep, your stress levels, all of it is feeding in
mm,
to that load. One of the things I learned in psychology, I'm sure you know this, is that
mm,
your body doesn't differentiate between different types of stress. When we look at the cortisol and the different hormones in our body that are responding to stress,
mhm.
it's the same um, mechanisms, whether it's physical stress, mental stress,
Yes.
emotional, cognitive. It doesn't matter what or if we're talking about stress of heat or whatever. If your body's feeling stress, it's the same response. We like
Mhm,
to think that there's a mind-body separation, so we talk about the mind-body, connection. There's no
mhm.
such thing in my mind. It's like
Right.
you're one being. You're a mental physical being. You're a physical mental being. It's just one thing. And so if you don't take all of it into account, you're going to overload simply because
Mm,
you're trying to compartmentalize your life, and you think that, yeah, all this other stuff's going on, but surely my running's going to still be, feeling great. And
yeah.
you might have a couple of good sessions, but if stress levels are high because of other reasons, your body will tell you, and it'll tell you through your running. This idea of a barometer. You're going,
Mm,
you're you're going to get feedback, about the fatigue that you're feeling. So I think seeing that it's a full system, and that all these things are part of the load, but within the current load that I'm putting on myself right now, is it sustainable? Well, for
mhm.
me, I don't like doing something so hard on one day that I can't bounce back within a couple of days.
Ah,
There's a very classic hard easy system that a lot of top athletes in the world go by,
mm,
where there'll be a harder day, higher load, and there will be a little bit less
right.
load on the next day and a little higher load. Um, and I think that if you feel a certain amount of energy in terms of, just the, how much energy you actually feel during a run or whatever movement you're doing. How's your muscular skeletal set system feel? What's the
Mm,
muscle tone, of your legs? So it's not even necessarily soreness, but you can just feel like there's a lot of work in there, right?
yeah, yeah.
You come into one of these more challenging days, and you are feeling ready for it. You're feeling rested and, energetic, and your body's feeling good. It's feeling prepared for it. So you
Mhm,
do the load that you feel like you've adapted to. So it's not too much. It's not too little. It feels just right. And then within a couple days, if you can go into that next session feeling just as good, if not better, than you did before, today's session,
mm,
then that's optimal load, right? You're recovering on the schedule that you've set for yourself. But it doesn't have to. To me, there's no magic actually about this hard easy system. It could be hard easy, like, you could do that on a daily basis. You could do a load today that you're like, okay, this is going to be my daily repeatable load. That I'm going to do something that I'm going to, that I know I can recover within 24 hours. right?
Right.
So the load that I do today, I can bounce back and do the same. If I want to do the same thing tomorrow, I could do that because I didn't do so much today that I'm going to be feeling tired tomorrow. Um,
Mm.
and even multiple times a day, you could do that, right? Like I'm going to
Right.
do something that I'm going to do a number of pull-ups this morning, and by this evening, I'll be able to do that same amount of pull-ups again because I didn't do so much this morning
Mm.
that I can't bounce back and do it again in the evening, right?
Mm.
So, I don't think that, and that's why there's so many. If you look at so many different programs out there at the elite level, you'll see that the ingredients are often the same. There's certain principles that they all apply, but the way that they mix those ingredients and how much of those ingredients that they're using can be incredibly varied.
Mm.
But of course, as um, compulsion as a human being is to look at what the best do and be like, oh, that person just got the world record. That must be the secret. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they beat the world record, say in the 800 meters. The world record in 1981 was 141, and now it's decades later, and we are at 140. It's improved by a second. Just over a second.
Mm.
It's improved, and with the technologies of shoes and
Yeah.
the tracks that they now run on, I'm convinced that world record holder in 1981 would have probably been the world record holder today.
Yes.
So, and so why are we not looking at his training, right? It's but we're now like, oh, but we've advanced so much. It's like, yeah, no, but he found the right thing for himself. He found the right
Yeah.
optimal load for him. And actually, the athlete I'm talking about is Sebastian Coe, and he's now head of world athletics. He's gone into politics
Mm.
and everything else. But his training schedule on paper looks just ridiculous. He was doing what I considered hard workouts, interval training sessions, twice a day for multiple days in a row. He'd often do that for like 10 days in
Oh,
a row.
wow.
And then he would take 4 days easy. There was one, like, and he didn't do this all the time, but there was a cycle of training, maybe a number of years in his training, where he had like a 14-day cycle of where he was apparently doing 10 days of that type of training and then 4 days easy. And then he would do another cycle of 10 days. And you look at it and you're like, well, how could he recover?
Yeah.
His father, who was his coach, came and did a talk in Victoria where I was living over 20 years ago. And I asked his dad, I was like, well, how could he recover? From, like, I do a hard workout and it takes me multiple days to recover.
Yeah.
How could you do a hard workout in the morning and be ready to go again at night? And his dad kind of looked at me with like honest puzzlement in his face. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you be able to recover? And I was like, huh? I just could not wrap my brain around it. What I realize now is the reason he was able to do that was because the way that he had incrementally increased his training over time, the way that he had made adaptations, is that it what the workout that I considered stressful, that for me would have just been like, that would just destroy me. Um, he had fully internalized that load. It wasn't stressful for him any longer.
Mm.
He was able to do it again in the evening. He would come back and do the same session, but he often do something different to work on a different part of
Yeah,
his
yeah.
pace training or his endurance training. But he could bounce back that quickly. It wasn't hard. The
Mm.
reason he could do it was because he was able to make those adaptations. He had already made the adaptations, so he could bounce back that much quicker. But if I
Mm.
tried to do it, and trust me, I tried. I was a very motivated young, track and field athlete when I was in high school, and I'm going to do some of Sebastian Coe's training. And one of my stress fractures that I had in my shin, which
Oh,
is
no.
it's not a complete break. It's just like a little crack in the shin bone. Recovers within 6 weeks if you properly rest. But came from me trying to do training
Oh,
that
yeah.
my hero, at that time, had been doing. And so I wasn't training where I was. I wasn't training at my level of adaptation. I was trying to train at a world record holder's level of adaptation, which is like, no, that's not, you're just not there.
Yeah.
You're not even close.
This is really such a good example of, like you said, training at our level, like be where you are rather than over push. So part of recovery you're naming is don't overtrain. Like if you
That's
want to recover better, like if
it.
you're overtraining every time, what if it's not running, if it's swing, whatever it is, but if you're overtraining, and like you're saying, even Olympic athletes, they have cycles of higher training, less training, more training. Like it's not about 100% every day, every session, where you're destroying yourself. That's right? Like I think that's a misconception.
Well, one of the interesting things about the way I see that training has evolved at the top level, um, is taking this into account more and more. Because I think that in
Mm,
the 80s, there still was like, I think a lot of top athletes were still pushing the limits of what the body
mm,
can tolerate, with this idea of no pain, no gain, and just like maximal training. How much mileage can I do? How much intensity can I
yeah.
do within that system? And to a certain, to a certain level, the body is making adaptations if they've done it in an incremental enough way. But at a certain point, the body is saying, like, this is just too much load. Even if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
try to make the adaptations and you've done it incrementally enough, it's just like it's just too much. And so if you actually look at the amount of mileage, for instance, that we're doing now, there's some outliers. All actually, one of the outliers in terms of mileage is our top Canadian marathoner Cam Levins, actually from my
Mm,
hometown of Courtney, but he does up to like upwards of 300 kilometers a week, which is and 3 times a day training, and that works for him. There's going to be
wow.
outliers, but if you look at the majority of top runners, and this is including world record holders in the marathon, they're not doing that level of mileage. They're actually doing often less than they were doing in the 80s. But
Mm,
what they're doing better is a better job of refinement, in my opinion.
yeah.
They're looking at how to recover, how to not overdo it in any one session. There's a really big trend right now in distance running called double threshold training, and
Mm,
what that is lactic threshold is it's an intensity point that when you run a little bit faster than your lactic threshold, you start building up lactate, or what often people call lactic acid, in
mhm.
your muscles faster than your body can clear it. So that's when we start breathing harder. We start feeling that this is starting to
Feeling
feel
like lead in the legs.
exactly that, like, and that kind of almost a burning sensation. The acid part, when we say lactic
Mm,
acid, is that kind of this burning sensation. So if you're doing a full out 400-meter sprint, there's very, very, very high levels of lactate or lactic acid when you're doing that,
mm.
and that burning sensation of just like we call it swimming in lactate, is from the hydrogen ion, I guess, which is the acid, in your muscles, right? And it just feels
Mm,
this kind of burning sensation. But when you train at lactic threshold, you're just kind of right on this line, and you can kind of teach your body to build up a little bit of this lactate, but also clear it
mm,
efficiently. So you become very good at uh, maximizing your aerobic system, and not building up
mm.
too high of a level of lactate. And if you can increase the amount of the speed that you're able to run without building a lot of lactate, you will be a faster distance runner.
Mm,
So a lot of the top runners have realized that if we get more of this training in, we will push ourselves to a higher level. But if you say did a workout like at the top level, they might do 20 times a kilometer and try to do it at lactic threshold,
wow.
with say like a minute recovery between each kilometer, or even 30. It might even take even as little as 30 seconds, but that would be a very, very stressful session, and it would
Yeah.
take a long time to recover from. Might take a couple days or 3 days, 4 days. But if you break it up into smaller bite-sized chunks and do what they're calling double threshold, you're doing 10
Mm,
kilometers of that running in the morning. And it's like, oh, you just finished the session. You could have done the whole thing again, but you're trying to lower the fatigue level in your body. So you're like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm going to
mm,
go home, take a nap, have some food, replenish, and then go out again in the evening and do another 10 times a kilometer,
mm.
at the same intensity. But now you're fresh, right? And because you've split it up, you're not as fatigued as you would be if you did it all as one big super session.
Yeah.
And so some of these top runners will do this multiple times a week. On Tuesday, they'll do double threshold, one in the morning, one at night.
Mm,
They'll do easier mileage training the next day. A lot of these top athletes will still put in 20 kilometers or more of running on their easy days, but for them,
yes.
adapted to the level that they can recover from that. That's where they are, right? But they can come back on Thursday and do another double threshold session, and then come back on Saturday and do some more training. Um, they'll often work in some variation of different types of paces as well,
For
and
sure. Yeah.
not just do the same 10 times a kilometer every time. They're mixing it up with slightly different pace variations and slightly different length of the repetitions they're doing. Um,
Mm,
but the whole concept, though, is that on paper, you're like, wow, they're doing 2 workouts a day. But just like Sebastian Coe, he's like, well, maybe he's doing 2 workouts a day because you're actually able to recover more if you
Yeah.
do a moderate session twice a day versus a really hard session once a day.
Right.
And I think that we see it like with a lot of people I coach. Very few people are training twice a day. Most of them are training either daily or they're training a few times a week. They're training
Yeah.
3 or 4 runs. They might mix it with cross training, doing stuff on the bike and elliptical machine and something that's popular these days called the arc trainer. But ways of reducing the impact load on the body by mixing things in, but still build the overall fitness without the
Yes.
active running.
Yeah.
Um, but what I think you see is that what I try to get through to some of these runners I'm coaching, I'm like, yeah, we could do 3 times a week, and you think that that might be the less stressful way because you're getting these breaks in between these days off. But say somebody's doing 60 kilometers between 3 runs, which is 20 kilometers per run if you're averaging it out. I would actually argue that it's less stressful,
Mm.
and you're getting a stimulus more often. So maybe you're actually reinforcing the natural feeling of running because you're doing it more often by doing 6 10-kilometer runs during the week than if you're doing just 3 big sessions, right?
Right.
So one of the so I think a lot of people think that well, I can't recover by running 6 days a week. Well, actually, you probably might actually recover better if you do a little bit less on those days. You think you
Mm.
can't recover because you want to do these big sessions that are really fatiguing.
Yes.
And you're right. Like you may not, you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd break down if you tried to do that. But maybe you can split it up into smaller bite-sized chunks that allow you to absorb it more uh,
Yes.
effectively.
So you're just really, I mean, this is like a master class on recovery with changing the training sessions, how much you train. Just love the detail that you shared with that, because it really kind of opens our eyes to, wait a minute, there's a lot we can do to improve recovery, including how we're training. So sometimes I think when we think recovery, we think what we're going to do after we finish the session. Like,
For sure.
am I going to stretch, or am I, but you're saying, wait a minute, part of recovery is how you're training. You recover better. I'm wondering, do you have any other tips in terms of what do you do to help your recovery? Like whether it is stretching or foam rolling, what are your like top three
Yeah, there's a
tips?
lot. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I've taken this idea of choosing your attitude in any given moment, to the extreme, right? So if every moment of the day that I'm awake, I can be engaging in, you know, creating these more efficient, higher quality pathways, neurological pathways. And if I'm training, I might be, like it's all about the movement at the time. And there is a certain stress because of the load that I'm putting on myself. But if I've done it incrementally enough and I'm tuning into how my body's responding, I can say, okay, yeah, that's optimal load.
Mm,
But what can I do the rest of the day that's going to feed into continuing to feel great when I'm running? Um, Waking up and right away, the first thing I do when I wake up is I do a stretching routine that just allows
mm,
me to create like a mind body connection. Right, I've been
mm.
asleep for 8 hours. I say that as an ideal. It's often not 8 hours, still working on that piece of the puzzle. But I wake up and I'm trying, now I'm conscious and I'm trying to make a conscious connection with myself. And so actually doing a stretch, even while I'm still laying in bed, from literally my toes all the way up, and just kind of like
Mm.
tuning into kind of waking up with myself, right? Um, so starting the day on that kind of,
Stretching, yeah.
yeah, and for me, because I do it every day, it's not a big stretch. I'm just kind of almost checking in with myself. I'm like, oh, yeah,
Mm,
I can pull my leg this way. It feels good. Okay, I don't have to spend any time there. I pull my leg the other way. Yeah, that feels equal. Okay, great. I'm kind of like,
mm.
kind of checking in with the system and seeing how everything's
Yeah.
feeling after whatever happened yesterday, right? But if there was like, oh, that's a little tighter on the right side than my left, okay, I'll spend a little more time on that, right? So, but if I've been
Mm.
doing this regularly and if I'm not overloading, often it really is just like, okay, just going through all these movements and saying, yeah, great, I feel great, and I can do it
It's
less.
like a little systems check, like systems one, good, two, three, good, good, good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so from there, and then I do some breath work.
Mm,
I'm very into this idea of the physiological sigh. I know that you're
mm,
aware of what I'm talking about there, and this is
mhm,
just a breathing technique where um, it's one of the most effective, or maybe it is the most effective way to, with your breath, to bring you from sympathetic nervous system, which is, fight or flight, stressful, your body's responding to
Mhm.
stress, into a parasympathetic and relaxation, regeneration, repair mode. And
Mhm.
so it basically is just like a long, slow breath in through your nose. And then at the top of that breath, taking another big one to fill up, and then an audible sigh out. So and when I think if you somebody has like a panic attack or they're actually feeling
Mhm.
anxious, I think the mechanism that's going on there is that this big breath in. How can you be simultaneously in a state of anxiety when you're
Yeah.
slowing yourself down that much, and you're telling your brain that, hey, I'm in control of my breath, which is, so I mean, with anxiety, some people are maybe even hyperventilating, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
slow yourself down enough to take that long, slow breath, fill yourself up, be in control of it, do that multiple
Mm.
times. You're basically, telling your brain, it's like, you're okay, you're fine, like you can handle this, you're in a good place.
Mm.
You're just kind of shifting your whole physiological system into this repair mode and into this calm place. And I do that
Mm.
all the way through the day. And so if I'm not
Mm.
actually stressing myself, and purposely adding to the load of what I'm trying to adapt to, right after that, I'm doing a physiological sigh. I'll even do them
Right.
during recovery periods within an interval training session. So if I'm, say, doing my workout a couple days ago on the bike was 20 repetitions of a minute and a half with 30 seconds recovery. And so during that 30 seconds recovery, after I've done a minute and a half of fast cycling, trying to be around my lactic threshold for that particular session, I will, within that 30 seconds, try to get that a physiological sigh in.
Mm.
Like it's both a mental and a physical reset, and saying, okay, you're ready again. Okay, let's do
Let's
another one.
do it. Yes. You got me so excited to do it right here. Can you guide us through a short one right here? So listeners, if they want to check
Yeah,
it out, like, because that's very practical, efficient, real quick, and anyone can just really learn it.
yeah.
And
So here's the long.
unless you're driving right now and listening, just keep your eye on the road if you're driving or operating machinery.
That's
But
right.
yeah, I wonder if you can guide us through it. So it's two deep breaths in. Is that what we did?
So
Two
it's that
deep breaths in.
deep breath in, and at the very top, to kind of like really feel like you're almost filled up. So I'm
Fill
trying.
it. Filling the upper lungs.
You mentioned is you are trying to fill up fill up from the diaphragm up, right? So it's
Mm.
belly breathing. So I'm breathing in and filling up, and then like with that long slow breath, maybe I'm
Mhm.
almost topped up to the top of my lungs, and that last breath in, I'm trying to like, right, I'm filled up.
Fill the top of the lungs.
Yeah, this audible sigh out. And it feels good, right?
It does.
It's a reset.
It does. It's so quick.
And yeah, I'll do that all through the day.
Mm.
Um, there's I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Huberman Lab, which is a
Mhm.
podcast by a neuroscientist from Stanford.
Mm.
And so he's done a lot of work with the physiological sigh. He mentioned that's a great thing to do right after a workout. If you can
Yeah.
spend, because you're in in sympathetic mode after a workout, you've just stressed.
Yes.
And again, stress isn't a bad thing. Stress is only a bad thing if you're not making the adaptations to those
Yeah.
stressors. So if it was the optimal load and you're feeling good, but you are in, parasympathetic or sorry, in sympathetic nervous system, you want to shift it. So do it right away as part of your cool down.
Yeah.
Maybe you've gone for a jog or like an easy kilometer after an intense training session. And then you sit down, maybe you're about to drive home. And so before you drive home, you're going to sit in your car for 3 minutes and do multiple physiological sighs. And you've just taken
Love it.
yourself from one mode of being, shifted yourself into like recovery and repair. And now
Repair.
I know a lot of people actually have troubles. Actually, they come out to a running clinic in the evening. And they're like, oh, sometimes I have a hard time going to bed afterwards. And
Mm.
my suspicion is that they haven't actually shifted out of sympathetic nervous system. They're still
Mm.
in it, and their brain is like, I don't want to go to bed right now because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
active. Right? I'm still meeting whatever threat is in the environment. That's like I'm in fight or flight mode still.
Yeah, yeah. Still
Like,
revved up.
that's right.
Yeah. So this is so practical. Like so practical can be picked up. And so you've shared a couple of tips so far in terms of recovery. So we're talking about sleep, making sure getting enough sleep, talking about stretching, talking about physiological sigh,
Mhm.
just all of this modulating training so we're not overtraining. And what else? Anything else to name before we talk about some of the misconceptions? Anything else in terms of your recovery that you do that helps you? Like, there's ice baths and stuff like that people do. Is that drinking water? Yes.
The water, the water. I'm never far away from a water bottle, and a glass
Mm,
right beside me. Always working with that. Um, and yeah, I think that that's a huge part of it is hydration.
mm,
I think a lot of people are chronically dehydrated, and
yeah.
they hold themselves up with more diuretics, alcohol and caffeine,
Yeah.
than they do things that actually rehydrate them properly. Um, we're made of what, 70 something percent water.
Mm.
So I always think of, if you're not drinking enough, it's like a mud puddle. You're just like
Yeah, yeah.
cold water sitting there,
It's getting a little muddy.
stagnant. And I mean, if you're drinking and going to the bathroom all the time, it's like a stream, right? It's like a clear stream. You're always, it's
Yeah.
punishing. And it is important to note, if you are drinking a lot of water, make sure that you are getting electrolytes in there as well. That it's that you're,
Mm,
whether it's good salt, good amount of salt in your diet if you're doing a lot of aerobic work,
mm.
or actually adding electrolytes to your drinks
Right.
and stuff as well.
Yeah.
For me, that's more important. For most people, have enough salt in their diet, but if people are doing a lot of aerobic training and they're sweating a lot, well, you're not just losing water, you're losing electrolytes, you're losing salts,
Yes.
potassium, and that kind of thing from your body.
Yeah, this has helped me putting the electrolytes, just taking my vitamins, like even magnesium for me. It was just like when overtraining is sort of cramping up. So just making sure that taking care of
For
the
sure.
body and just the simple things we forget, like water. So there's so many things, like this is so rich and filled with helpful, detailed information. So really appreciate everything you shared, and I wonder if we can loop back to any final misconceptions we didn't address about running that stops people. One of
Mhm.
them is this overtraining, like no pain, no gain
Mhm.
misconception.
For
And
sure.
I know I mentioned about, like, is running is very bad for your knee. That was a long misconception that
Yeah.
kept me afraid from like challenging myself to even doing my first 5K, 10K, right? In the first half.
Common one. I mean, working, as a coach, and of course training for so many decades as a runner myself, and then and at the shoe store at Forerunners, hearing on a daily basis, that type
Mm,
of perception that running is bad for your knees, running on hard surfaces is bad for your knees versus soft surfaces,
mm,
and this all comes back to optimal load once again. There's a great study actually that looked at well, I'm actually probably combining a bunch of studies when I talk about the stuff, but there was one that looked at running on the road versus running on soft surfaces, and how that impacted arthritis in the knees over time.
mm,
And they actually found that running on the road on a hard surface prevented arthritis more than running on a soft surface. So, in terms of prevention, running on a hard surface is better for your knees. But
mm.
and there's like people like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it hurts my knees when I run on the road. It doesn't hurt my knees when I run on the trail. Well, that's because running on the road right now is too much load. But when you load
Mm.
impact on your body, you create bone density. This is why we're told as we get older to do weight bearing exercise,
Yeah.
to go to the gym and work on, doing some resistance training. Um, Running is no different. Running on a road is resistance training. It's more load on your body because more
Mm.
impact on the road than there is on a soft surface. And if you don't do too much, if you're working in the optimal load and your body's making adaptations, one of those adaptations is a higher density of bone.
Yeah.
You're going to have a higher bone density. So you're going to get injured. So when I got that stress fracture in my shins, I wasn't able to handle the load. I was overloading the system. I was such a motivated young athlete that I wanted to be as fast as I could, and I thought more was better. And I got injured because I wasn't ready for it. So I
Mm.
injured myself. But the interesting thing, of course, is that injury, with the shin, the calcium deposit that's formed as a result of the injury. I think I had three of them in high school. I didn't learn my lesson.
Jeez.
So I did learn my lesson eventually. Have had a bone injury in terms of like a stress reaction, or a broken bone or anything like that
Mm.
since high school. So I did learn to not do things too quickly. But one of the doctors did say, he's like, yeah, I probably could hit your shins with a crowbar at this point with the amount of calcium that you've built up
Oh,
with your
wow.
injuries, and you'd be totally fine. So even the injury itself created probably more strength in the bone because
Mm.
it had to get stronger as a result of the injury, which is, I guess, some irony in that one. But yeah, if you have an injury, so if your knees are already sore and you don't want to overload them, yes, go, maybe walking on the concrete's fine.
Right.
Surface is going to be what you need right now. But say over time you adapt and you said, yeah, my knees are feeling
Mm.
stronger. I never feel them. I've done all the exercises. I've done more, squats and deadlifts and lunges and step ups and step downs and all these different exercises to re-strengthen or scaffold
Yeah.
around the knee. I'm feeling ready to start running on the road. Well, you're not used to it yet though, so it's just like increasing weights on the squat bar at the gym. You don't just go to 500 pounds and then try to do that and get injured and say, well, resistance training is bad for me because it injured me. It's like, no, you just did too much.
Yeah.
Like you increased your load too fast and too much. So, don't do that. Don't overload.
Right.
The
Right.
running road is not bad for you. Overloading is bad for you. Right. And
Yeah.
and I would say, yeah, I think the other issue is that people will get injuries from other sports that they've done, and they actually have damaged their knees from those
Mm.
sports. It's often lateral movement that will injure the knees. So
Right.
they've just too much lateral shearing, and they've torn or damaged something within the knee, and so when they load that knee too much, it tells them that this hurts, and like, yeah, running on the road hurts more than running on the trails.
Mm.
Therefore, it must be better for me. You're right. For you, it is better for you. Don't go on the road.
Right.
It hurts. That doesn't make any sense. But it's not the road that at fault. That's at fault here.
Right.
And
So that's a
also
misconception,
not bad
clearly.
for knees. Overloading the knees is bad for your knees. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of reasons. And there are people who have biomechanical issues that are just not. They're not going to be efficient and light on their feet. In the same way as someone that's has more natural biomechanical efficiency.
Of
Um,
course.
we're all born with different vehicles in a sense, right? But I think
Yeah.
that overall, if we look at our genetic history, we are born to run. There may be
Yeah.
some reasons why you can't now, and that there's another movement that feels better. And by all means, and if for me, I just could, no matter what I did, I couldn't run without being less than 3 out of 10 on the pain scale for whatever specific issue I'm currently working on. And I couldn't do it without compensating. I'm just like reinforcing really inefficient patterns. Yeah, I would find something different. And there's a million different activities you can do to move
Of
your body
course. So
forward.
staying
So,
healthy and active. Yeah. But you see, this taps into another misconception that I had before getting into running, which is, oh, it's not something I can sustain as I age. Like if you had asked me at 30, like would I be running at 50? I'd be like, no way. Like people make it to their 50, they're not going to be running. And right now, and I'm 50 now,
yeah,
I'm stronger in my running than I was able to do in my 30s. Like, so that's an interesting, like, the sport of running, if done well, maintained, recovered, taking care of injuries. People do it in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Like that, a lot of sports you can't do it. That surprised me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's incredible. I think like one of my, I guess you could call it foundational beliefs, is that we have not even touched the surface of what it means to age well physically and mentally.
Mm,
I think because they, of course, they're one and the same. But I think that we're just scratching the surface of the knowledge
yeah.
of how to maintain ourselves, and this is why I like this idea of the vintage car analogy. Where you have one person who just wants to drive this beautiful car, right? They're not interested in maintaining it. They don't want to be a mechanic. They just want to drive this incredible car
Mhm.
they have. And but it's something, because they're not maintaining it, but maybe have some good people looking after it for them too, right? And so great, have a good team around you that also can help you look after that vehicle. But you are your own mechanic when it comes down to it. Like you're the one that's
Mm,
getting the feedback from your body and from your mind, telling you whether something needs to be maintained, have some intention brought to it.
mm,
You're observing yourself every single day, and through movement, I think that the movement gives you the opportunity to check in with yourself like every day.
mm.
And so when you're talking about habits of recovery, well, there's from the time we get up to the time we go to sleep at night, it's just filled with these little
Yeah.
habits. I do. It's another concept that I love is this idea of workout snacks, right? Um,
What is that?
exercise snacks. So it's basically these things that you do throughout the day. I link it with this idea that an animal never stops moving like an animal, right?
Mm,
We try to again compartmentalize. Here's my time for working out, and the rest of the time I'm doing different things. And it's like as
mm.
if this is my time to think about myself as a physical animal, but the rest of the time I am just a work
On a
animal,
desk.
social
Yeah.
animal, a mental animal, like, but somehow you just leave everything separate throughout the day. And for me, there's like I want to be connected to my body at all times, even when I'm having a conversation with you. Am I slouching? Like how what am I doing with
Mm,
my body right now? I want to like straighten up now and then and be like, okay, just be aware of my posture. I don't want to like
mm,
add up these like inefficient postural behaviors and have these imbalances, magnify over time.
mm.
I've had friends and people I've coached in the past who, they're all messed up on the right hand side because they're so used to, having the mouse there,
Yeah.
right? So they're always, and now they've realized it, and they've purchased like ergonomic desks, so everything is just right where they want it to be, and they can stand up. Even the act of standing up is an exercise or a workout snack. Like you're moving, right? You've made a decision that I'm not just going to be at a sit down desk all the time. I'm going to
Right.
stand up. And hey, if I'm going to stand up, why don't I stand on one foot? And you're improving your balance, while you're doing it. If you saw me cooking, I I'm on my or doing dishes. I'm on one foot all the time. I'm like, okay, I'm at the right hand. I'm on my right foot and washing the dishes. Then I go to the left hand. I'm on my left side as I'm rinsing them, putting them into the dish rack. Right, little ways of like linking movement and strength throughout the day that
Mm,
adds up, right? And it just becomes the way you are now. So I'll do something called an arch raising exercise that strengthens the arch of my foot, so that helps prevent plantar fasciitis, which is a very
mm.
common injury, not a running injury, because I on a daily basis I'm dealing with people in the store who are just
Mm.
walking, just non athletic people just have sore feet, and a
Right.
big part of that, some of it is as a result of just being on flat surfaces, in my opinion, where they're just always overloading the arch. I think the foot is actually meant to be
Mm,
contoured into the soft surface of the earth, soft sand,
mm.
soft grass, soft soil. And so if you're going barefoot on a flat surface and you're always like collapsing into that
Right.
because you're not contouring in, that adds up for a lot of people and overstresses the
Mm.
foot. And I think people do get overuse injuries like plantar fasciitis. So while I'm brushing my teeth, I do my arch raising exercises. I've linked it with another behavior that's already something I do multiple times a day. So, hey, why not? While I'm standing here, I can also do this behavior.
Love that.
Um,
That's something we can all take on.
what's
Like
that?
these little, we can all take this on. Like this.
Really? Yeah.
What did you call it again?
Exercise or workout snacks. Yeah.
Workout snacks. I
All the
love
way
that.
through the day,
Like
right? Yeah.
little snacks. So it doesn't become like just here's one period did my walk or my run, my swim or my whatever, and then not moving rest of the day or not thinking about the body rest of the day. What you're saying is like have these little snacks. I love that. I'm gonna do that. These little
When I'm
things you
helping
can do.
customers at the store, I'll go
Yeah,
down to a squat, right? Like while I'm tying their shoelaces. Sometimes
yeah,
I'm sitting, but I'm like, oh no, I've sat too long. Push the fitting stool behind me. I'm going to go down
yeah,
to the squat and tie some laces,
yeah.
right? And it's just being, like just, and that just
Aware of your body.
natural position to be in.
Yeah,
Actually, that as a position that we should all be practicing on a daily basis. That's one of them.
yeah,
It used to be like that. Instead of sitting in chairs, we would be in a squat position, at the fire, tending the fire,
yeah,
picking, doing things, and also in a position of action, like or like potential action. You're in a squat, you can stand up from a squat, you can move really quickly
yeah.
from that position, and actually do movement training where I move from that squat position into other
No, I
positions
love that.
quickly, just to practice like how would I lunge or jump from this position, right?
Yeah.
Walking up and down your stairs in your building, right? That's another work. That's an exercise snack. So don't take the elevator. Get a snack in right now, right? Yummy.
Yeah, I love that. So here's a little challenge for anyone listening or watching. If you want a little snack,
Yeah.
welcome to do so. A little workout snack, a little movement. It's
You're
beautiful,
right now.
really beautiful. And you mentioned earlier about the store and helping others. This is how we met, and it's something actually for me was my own misunderstanding. I didn't think shoe would make a really big difference.
Mhm.
Not being a runner all my life, it was like for me, running was like I would do it to warm up or do some sprints, but like picking up running, where like 5K, 10K, half marathon, it's a game changer. Like getting the right shoe that can fit me, rather than most of my life, I was like, oh, I like this brand or I like this look, I like this color. So, and that has really made a difference for me, like
Yeah.
reduced injuries. And so
That's a
maybe that's a
whole can of worms, my
misconception.
friend. That's a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
It's such a complex topic. But
Yeah.
if if to not create our own podcast about the trends in footwear and the lots of conflicting information and over information, like people do their own research,
Mm,
it's great, but there's so much information out there about this. And I definitely have my own viewpoint on running shoes and how they
mm,
fit in with the health of the body, in especially in the artificial environment that we now find ourselves. Because I
mm.
do come from a evolutionary viewpoint that our foot evolved on, say, the plains of Africa. We contoured
Yeah.
this nice bird foot in. Maybe we were hanging from the trees with them at one point too. But it is like a hand for standing on. It's there
Yeah.
to grab and to feel, and we have thousands of nerve endings on the bottom of our feet, and those are in that natural environment. Are telling us all the time that you're okay. You're putting too much load in this way or this way,
Mm,
because they're giving feedback to the brain at all times. But and so in that natural environment, I think that they're completely functional. And if I could still be running all the time in soft sand and soft grass, and it was, I guess we can talk about temperature. If it was a good environment to be running all the time in bare feet, I'd be doing that. Like I think shoes are something that we've invented because we're no longer in that perfect environment. Um,
mm,
there was a whole minimalist movement where people were going back to and saying, okay, well, but thousands of years our feet were healthy without shoes. Why shoes now? Surely all
mm,
the injuries we're getting now are because of the shoes. Um, there's a lot of research that's debunked that whole idea.
mm,
When they actually look at minimalist shoes versus now what we call maximalist shoes, which are really thick midsoles, and all the other shoes in between, it turns out that the rate of injury is the same across all the different
mm.
types of
So it
uh,
doesn't really, the minimalist shoe doesn't really prevent injury.
no, and
Mm,
neither do any of the others really. But what
mm,
they find is that there's two things: changing too quickly between, say if you're in a maximalist shoe and then you read a book that said I should be a minimalist shoes is the answer because I'm getting injured in the other ones.
mm.
That quick change over, extreme
Right.
change to the other side of the spectrum could cause injury because your body hasn't made adaptations. It's all about adaptation again,
Mm,
right? Are you doing the right load? You're overloading your body simply by making too big of a change too quickly. And they
yeah.
also would go with it, probably be the same as well. Well, no, I've always been good here, but I've heard that these other shoes might be good, for even better for me. And they change too quickly. And so going more cushion could cause you.
Right.
The other interesting thing is the types of injury, even though the overall rate of injury is the same, the types of injuries between different shoes are different. So you might
Mm,
get more metatarsal stress fractures. Somebody trying to run in minimalist shoes on hard concrete, just the amount of load from the bending of the foot
mm.
might cause too much stress for them at the beginning because they haven't made those adaptations. Um, so, and different injuries, for the back or the knee or whatever with other types of shoes.
Right.
So it's such a complex thing. I think of it in more of a prescriptive way, with these maximalist shoes that are really thick. They're the exact opposite of minimalist shoes. For
Mm,
people who have arthritis in the big toe joint, and every time they bend, it causes pain. Well, they might want something that's a little stiffer and a little more rockered so that their foot
right.
doesn't load that joint so much. So that might be a prescriptive, footwear for that person.
Mm. But it's finding the right, finding the right one for the person's specific needs,
And at
and
this time, and that might
at this
change.
time,
It may take every
yeah, yeah.
user experience.
Which is not by just the look of the shoe. Like this
Oh,
is the misconception,
no,
right?
no,
This is the misconception that it really can help getting the right shoe that fits
for
the
sure.
current situation, whatever. If there's injury, no injury. What are you looking for? So I just wanted to name that because that has helped me, and you have really helped me with that.
One of
Um,
one
yeah.
little thing I would add that I think has been a really beneficial thing for me to conceptualize it and to pass on to customers as well, is this idea that, okay, so um, this hard surface that we're running on now, this hard flat surface, well,
Hmm.
first of all, it's not giving you the shock absorption, that you would have had in that soft natural, grass or sand or whatever. But it's also not giving you that curvature and that full contact with the foot. So the way I look at it is that, what a running shoe is, in the same way as a horse that gets horseshoe put on him to
Hmm.
protect that from impact or the abrasion of, say, concrete. Um, you're putting a movable surface on your foot, right? So you're saying, okay, like, this surface doesn't feel optimal any longer. I'm going to put something on that has a little bit of cushion through the midsole that takes the place of the soft surface that would be the ideal environment for my foot. So I can put that
Mm.
environment underneath my foot, and I can put some curvature, maybe an insole that actually gives some contact all the way through the foot to feel like I'm getting all those nerve endings communicating with my brain.
Mm.
So for me, that's what I'm trying to find, is like, what is the optimal footwear and the
Right.
optimal surface that I want to have under my foot. And if it's the perfect surface, maybe that's no shoe at all. But maybe if it's
Mm.
like sharp rocks and roots, and I want something to protect me from getting a stone bruise or a root, digging into my foot, I might have a rock plate that comes through the shoe, and
Right.
that's a better surface than something that's really thin and soft, right? So there's a lot of, I think, looking at through that lens,
Right.
being like, okay, what's the best surface for my foot? And then if it's not the environment providing that best surface, then you put a movable surface on your foot that
Mm.
might create the best conditions for your foot to experience the run or the walk in a much more pleasurable way.
Well, I can't wait to get on my next run already. You're getting me all pumped up. And hope the same for listeners, whether you're running or walking or whatever you're doing in terms of movement. This has been so enjoyable, and we went over because I kind of just lost track of time and had so like I want to ask you so many more questions as well, but I know we're at the end, and I wonder any final thoughts you would like listeners to know before we end, and I'll include as well the way that they can contact you, however they can reach you. But any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, if I was to bring all of this back to one concept, it's just understanding that, yeah, taking this as a long term process, and
Mm.
not getting distracted by all the extrinsic, the external pressures. When it comes
Mm.
to like events like racing and that kind of stuff, a lot of people get very stressed out about something's coming up, and in 2 months they have a marathon
Yeah.
coming up, for instance, and it becomes the what I call the tail wagging the dog scenario, where the upcoming event dictates the behavior that you're currently
Mm.
engaging in, even if that's not the optimal and the most caring behavior that you could be engaging in. So if you always are grounded in the idea that the reason you're doing this is to care for yourself and to continue moving well over the course of your lifetime, if you can, if your luck is on your side as well, and you hold that as like, this is the purpose. I want to
Mm.
be healthy. I want to flourish. I want to feel great. This short-term thing, and that's an extrinsic goal, is this race that's coming up,
Yeah.
shouldn't distract from that. Do the optimal and the most caring behaviors for yourself on a daily basis, and then if you get to that race and you're healthy enough and
Mm.
energetic enough to actually do that event, then that should be a celebration of all the process oriented goals that
Right.
you engaged in. Should be the thing that leads to that, right? It shouldn't be the other way around, that told you to do X amount
Right.
of mileage today and the amount of speed and everything else, because that was the purpose. I think people have, like, at least from my viewpoint, are getting everything completely flipped in their minds, that they
Mm.
think that that's the goal. It's like, no, the goal is you, right?
Yeah.
Like, keep that in your sights as the daily focus, and then you're not going to go wrong. And you will get to that run if you're doing things well, and if you have luck on your side, you're going to get there, and you're going to be able to have a great run on the day, and the best run that you can have, because
Mm.
you've been attending to the right things on a daily basis, right?
Right.
So of course, we always call it, like, and they do this in schools now, right? Process oriented goals versus oriented goals, right? Like, focus on the process. That's what it's all
Yeah.
about, and refine that process over time. Keep on being curious about it. Keep on, yeah. being interested in learning about how to refine that more and more over time. It's not a static process that's just like, okay, now I've created my routine, I'm just gonna like go through the motions of that every day. Ugh,
Yeah.
it's just dull, right? Like, no, like you can mix
Yeah.
things
To
up, you keep
actively
on
engaging in it.
engage in it, yeah. and
Yeah, yeah.
and the thing that could be another whole podcast was the idea of flow state. Like for me, flow is this concept of being completely immersed in something, completely engaged with it.
Mm,
There's a sense of timelessness, right? Because you're just like fully into it. Like you're going
mm,
deep into the thing that you're engaging with the behavior of any kind. And people experience flow state at work, in music, in athletics,
yes.
and all in everything, right? If you go deeply enough into something, and there's a balance between your capability and the challenge that you're engaging with,
Mm,
that's when people will have these experiences of flow state. And for
yeah.
me, that is kind of like, that becomes like, it's almost like that's the point on the horizon that we should always be aiming at, is this kind of,
Yes.
that's what I want. Like that experience is telling you, I call it the sweet spot experience, right? Like that's telling you you're on the right
Mm,
track. And if you're always just grinding it out and you're tired and it's just like things aren't feeling good, it's like, guess what? You're never going to feel flow state when you're
yeah.
doing it
Yeah.
away, right? So if your goal is to be in flow, then nurture the things that get you there, which is not
Mm,
forcing things, being exactly where you are, meeting. It's challenging, but it's a
mm,
achievable challenge. I always like to use the word enjoyably challenging, right? Just it feels right, right? And if it feels
mm,
right, you're on the right track, right? Keep on, and you're getting that feedback all the time. So listen to yourself.
mm. Thank you so much. And I really feel there's another podcast here. There's so much we can cover, even more than what we did today, but so enjoyable. And I'm wondering, what is a good way for people to find you? Is it by
Yeah, so
email you want me to put?
not on a lot of social media. I've always kept that
Mm,
very simple in my life. So
mm,
if you want to reach me, just through my personal email and business email at vanrunning@gmail.com. So that's just
mhm.
VAN running@gmail.com.
Yeah, okay, and I'll put that in the show notes as
If you have any
well.
questions, so you want to reach out, absolutely.
Thank you so much for everything you've done for so many people, including me, that you've kept me motivated, kept me inspired, kept me looking at how I can get better. I really appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you represent, your mindset, and your well being. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the listeners for listening. If you're watching, for watching. Hope you found this useful. May your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you. Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.